Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is my review of Art of the Devil 3, a Thai horror movie from 2008 that is an official prequel to Art of the Devil 2. This film sheds some light on the unfortunate events in Miss Panor's life before Art of the Devil 2. Or it actually kind of takes place during it, kind of a complicated timeline. But having lost his mother after his unfaithful father poisoned her, Ta develops a dangerous plan to utilize the unconscious body of his father's former mistress, the beautiful Miss Panor, to conduct a soul transfer and bring his own mother back to life within Miss Panor's body. Pretty terrible idea. Enlisting the help of an ambitious shaman, Dit, Ta and his family proceed down a rabbit hole of supernatural soul hijackings, torture, and black magic brutality. Yep. The first Art of the Devil film had its own separate story, so Art of the Devil 2 and 3 is almost kind of like a two-part big story, right? But all three of these movies have a main theme to them, if you've noticed. The cycle of vengeance. In other words, revenge begets revenge. A timeless principle highlighting that vengeance is a self-perpetuating, unquenchable cycle of violence, often turning victims into monsters. So the core takeaway of this whole franchise is basically, hey, if you engage in black magic, it'll eventually be your own undoing. And as is typical of these films, the opening half hour always seems to be just a little bit choppy and difficult to track and follow, And that is true to a degree for Art of the Devil 3. But it is easier to follow if you've seen Art of the Devil 2 recently, because they're basically one big film. So I definitely recommend that you watch Part 2 and 3 within a few days of one another. Or maybe just do a double feature evening, watch 2 and then 3. The good news is that this third entry does show some of Miss Panor's descent into vicious madness. You understand that progression a little bit more here. Also, the actress who plays her is very good, and she's the same actress that was showcased in Art of the Devil 2, actually, so nice to see her return here. She definitely gives the strongest performance in Part 2 and 3. The young male lead from Part 2 comes back, but he's kind of a bland character, you know what I mean? He's just kind of a placeholder. But Part 3 introduces a separate male character, a new guy, who's doing evil spellcasting stuff involving the third-eyed god. And I found his interactions to be more interesting because he basically makes an enemy out of everyone. He's kind of a wild card, so to speak, character. And I always kind of like wild card characters in movies. So you're not really sure where he's going to end up or what he's going to do. Also, his bathing habits are completely ridiculous, but that's the cost of doing witchcraft, I suppose. The plot improves more during the lengthy resurrection ritual, I would say. It happens at the end of Act 1, and that sets into motion some interesting conflicts. And the second half of the movie is pretty fast-paced in a good way. Natural environments are quite nice in this one. I think nature is captured better, in my opinion. Some of the yellow-tinted scenes look nice. I think that the production values are the best in Part 3 here. But what about the witchcraft horror, right? Well, the opening scene, I would say, is probably a slight downgrade to the opening scene in Part 2, which was a real banger. This does have some bloody violence, of course, but it's more of a traditional torture scene instead of, wild witchcraft. But we do have witchcraft in this film, of course, and the flesh wounds and legions are back, which is good news. For spellcasting shenanigans, the aforementioned resurrection ritual is pretty neat and fun. It involves a corpse and some oddball magic. The mirror effect was pretty cool as well. Most of the nasty stuff in Part 3 is saved for the second half, which ramps up the violence as it shifts to a witchcraft slasher flick that provides some satisfying death scenes. There's one particularly gnarly scene involving eyeballs, and that's a legit highlight. The makeup effects in that scene were good as well, and the torture methods are pretty ruthless. I would still say that part 2 of this franchise is the most disturbingly violent, but part 3 contributes enough to satisfy. So, I mean, and what else is there to say, folks? I recommend Art of the Devil 3. You get some good, like, conflicts, a spellcasting aspect, and witchcraft torture to boot. I would say after my recent rewatches, I think I enjoy both part 2 and 3 about evenly. If I was forced to choose, I might prefer part 3 just by a little, due to the character interaction involving that new dude who's seeking the third-eyed god. But the easiest way to watch this is via the Blu-ray box set from Error 4444 that includes all 3 Art of the Devil movies. So if you want to not commit to that box set, you can watch Art of the Devil 2 streaming very easily. But part 1 and 3 are harder to find online. So maybe you could always watch part 2. If you like it, buy the box set. And as always, folks, I'll see you next time.